This is going to be mostly a tutorial sort of announcement novelty search today. We want to make sure people are set up with CR3. Let's see if we can get Paul on the stage, head of infra at OTF.
Hey, mic check.
Yeah, loud and clear. So we very much want people to do this right. And there are some finicky aspects. You don't just turn it on, right? You have to upgrade to 8.5, and then you can turn it on. So Subnet 4 already made this mistake. If you turn it on without upgrading your nodes, the latest version of Bittensor, they don't have access to that specific call, and then your validator stops setting weights. So we had that happen. So just be clear, right? So you have to. I
appreciated their excitement, though.
Yeah, exactly. Race to the entrance there on CR, which was awesome to the Manifold team. So that's one thing. The second thing is that you do need to set a tempo period for CR3 to work really well. And Isabella will talk about that in a second, how you can pick that term. Generally speaking, longer tempos are better. But our recommendation for people is that they creep up on that term over the next couple days or a week to push that up and watch the difference in return APR for validators that are weight copying and those that are not. And then to go advanced, you can even tune that further by looking at things like liquid alpha, whereas liquid alpha is a parameter which will accentuate the effect of being late to the weights. So we have like a shout out to a couple subnets that are already doing it, like Subvortex was right on there, like immediately. Paul, actually, what's the list we got? We have a couple subnets. There's like 9 or so.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's a big push from Macrocosmos. They just dropped a big update for all of theirs. 3Gen, they just launched theirs. Omron, NASChain, I believe Bitmine's got theirs running. There's quite a few that have already jumped out. I think there's about a dozen right now.
Beautiful. Wow. That's so awesome. Yeah. Horde, Dataverse, Protein Folding, Omron, 3Gen, Bitmine, NASChain, Sports Sensor, Apex, Subvortex, and pre-training. 27% of the mission, 37% of the mission. Thank Doug. South 73 is waiting. Now, Isabella, you have a bit of a presentation of sorts. You have a script that we can run to look at a specific subnet. Would you be willing to chuck that up on the screen here and show people how to run it so that subnet owners can go through this process to pick the correct terms?
Yep. Okay. So basically, this is where the script is located, and then I think it's a very self-explanatory script where basically it just explain what is commit review, where we have already talked about it so many times already, and it helps you. It goes through everything downloading the metagraphs and then running the simulations, and also lastly, well, the simulation will be saved in a dedicated location, and then it will just help you to calculate what is the dividend loss. And basically the way that we are evaluating if a certain tempo, if a certain commit review interval is enough is by this metric here, G, where is an evaluation of at the numerator, this is the dividend per stake for the weights copier, right? And in the denominator is the dividend per stake for average validators that's in your subnet. So the way that we are evaluating is that if this P is smaller than 1, right, then it just means that given a certain commit review interval, you could be able to punish the weights copier such that the weights copier is not earning as much, will be earning just as much as average validator, median validator that's in your subnets, right? So after running all of these, you'll be getting your results, and then you can just compare your results to the conclusion here to make the decisions for what's commit review interval that you will have to set. So we would suggest a G that is at least smaller than 1, but then to be even better, G should be smaller than 0.91 or 0.82, something like that. Yeah. And I just want to remind you guys that I think it's missed out from to be missed out from some of the subnet owners, which is that like when your commit review interval has been increased or like is set, then you are supposed to like increase your immunity period as well, because the miners, well, because commit review will make it such that it will be taking longer for validators to discover new miners, right? So, and the period that is taking longer is just the commit review interval itself, right? So that's why like you should also increase your immunity period accordingly. Like for example, if your commit review interval is 7, then you are supposed to increase the immunity period by 7 as well. So does that make sense?
No, it makes sense to me, Isabella. But to reiterate, basically your immunity period needs to be as long as the interval that you're doing CR.
As long as, well, the immunity period should be as long as your original immunity period plus the CR.
Yes.
Because, yeah.
So it should be longer than the CR period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So, Paul, you're helping teams integrate this right now. Any other points that we need to bring out, like things that people are seeing that are issues?
Yeah, I think just from a stability standpoint, one of the big pushes and going back a little bit historically, the dev teams have been working really hard. Church Rouse been working really hard, just stability issues over time between Bittensor and Subtensor, making sure that that's stable. We've been encouraging people to upgrade. And the team's been taking a look at things like logging that kept people back on the 6x versions of Bittensor. It's really important for people to move with the ecosystem. So I want to kind of shout that out now, as it's really important. We went to Bittensor 7.4 and like the team rewrote how some of the connections were managed to improve stability there. And now we moved into 8 and there's more stability improvements. And then we have this big feature of 8.5. So people who have really adapted with time, it's been much easier for them to migrate than people maybe who were back on 6x. So definitely, like going forward, I just want to make a shout that definitely people need to consider moving forward and making that part of their work with the ecosystem to make it easy to migrate. Because on these, especially when these times where you do something as large as commit reveal, it's really important for the ecosystem to be able to move fairly well together. It just makes it easier across the board. But for now, I think just making sure, like the first thing is really just making sure subtensors really do update. We've seen some issues where people were thinking like that things weren't working, but it really was. Subtensor was fine. It just wasn't actually upgraded. People were like grabbing the wrong container or leaving it behind. It really wasn't being upgraded and some of those things. So there's a lot of people pointing at Finney right now, which is great. We've seen some load there, and the public nodes are there to help. But definitely it's still encouraged to run local subtensors. That was a big deal, is getting that done and then making sure you get to 8.5x. Are we on 8.5.1 now? Is that the latest right now? I think that's where we're at right now.
8.5.1 right now.
Yeah, cool. So I think that's the big thing, is making sure your subtensors are solid. Get 8.5.1 if you can. There's a lot of people on 8.5, which is fine. And then making sure like commit reveal is not a golden gun. It's very important. It removes a layer of gaming the system, which is hugely critical. When you turn it on, understand like, hey, because some people were like, hey, commit reveal is not working. And it's like, yeah, but right now everyone's interval is like at 1. Some people have already talked to Isabella and set that. Every subnet needs to dial it in. CR3 is a tool, it's a technology for people to use to help make them successful. So dialing that in is a responsibility of the subnet to be like, okay, what's the right value for us? And if I've talked about this with Garrett and with others, that this is if your subnet's more deterministic, in its weight changes, and Reef has talked about this too. If it's more static and there's not a lot of variance, then those are things that commit reveal may not be as effective for you. And commit reveal will remove a layer of people gaming the system. It removes weight copying, but there are other ways that people may exploit inside of subnets, and subnets need to be very cognizant that it's not that commit reveal isn't working. It's like, well, now somebody can't copy weights, but maybe they can do something else, to fudge their weights or do something that's not, actually providing consensus. So this is great information, Isabella, on just like, how can we dial that in and make it really effective?
Yeah, so I think this morning I also had like a great chat with Subnet 17, and I can share some insights that I've got there. So basically, one limitations of the commit review that we're having here is that like if the weights are barely changing at all in your subnets, then commit review it would basically just doesn't work, right? Because like the whole design of the commit review is based on the fact that like we assume the weight for the miners will be changing continuously. So like if there is such subnet where weights doesn't change, then like I think it would be it would sound difficult for them to like cooperate with commit review. So like I think suggestions that I would make there is just generally if your subnet has such a situation, you will have to rotate something in your subnet. Like for example, you can rotate the difficulty of the data set or of the difficulty of the task that you are like feeding into the miners, or like rotate different data sets or tasks. Well, data set or tasks that is like under different like category into the miners, something like that. So then like it would definitely be very helpful for you to reach like lower commit review period, or like even just to make it work, right? So
I think an example of that, Isabella, and I don't have hard data to support this, but just kind of using Subnet 13, using Data Universe as an example, they might be scraping data from all sorts of different places, but they have preferred terms, right? You could shift those preferred terms, and now the consensus has to shift because everybody's looking for different data, and the incentivization changes because it's not the same as it was 2 or 3 days ago, and that target shifts, and therefore it's harder for them to game the system and know what the scores would be because they have to perform slightly different work. So I think it's an interesting example.
Yeah.
In essence, if there's not enough churn on your subnet, then it's basically impossible to stop somebody from weight copying. And to be honest, if there isn't much churn in your subnet, there's not really that much value for validators also. I will say that what we expect after this point is that validators may still continue to weight copy and also get a lot more intelligent about the way in which they do that. And one of the things that I've learned about, for instance, how OWL weight copies is that they actually predict the weights. So they make intelligent estimations about the future weights in a subnet, which at a certain point, this just converges on intelligent validation. So, as an incentive mechanism for if we think of it from that perspective as a way of improving validation on Bittensor, if validators become intelligent and start predicting weights before they arrive, that's just honestly a game of intelligence. Hires a psychic, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I want to add to that. Just so I'm going to speak as Paul and not OTF here. Is I love Bittensor, and I think if you're faking weights and you're not providing consensus as a validator, then you're doing it wrong. And people will disagree with me on that. It's a back and forth. But if you want this platform to grow, mature, have people come to this yard and build businesses, build industries, build the future, I think all of us are here because we believe in that. But if we believe in that and then we talk out the other side of our mouths and we just make it an APY game of copying other people's work, it's not really true consensus. And you'll hear me say a lot like, yeah, we're a permissionless system, but we don't need to be permissive. We want the protocol to make boundaries where it's hard for people to game. CR3 is the start of that. It's not a silver bullet that kills everything, but it kills one layer. And once it peels that back, we can see when people are, doing predictive weights instead of copying weights. And we can go, okay, that's another challenge for us that maybe the protocol can solve, or maybe how we do validation in the future changes to solve it. But I think as a community, we don't have to be mean, but we have to be vocal about what are we going to do and choose to do as a platform and a culture to move forward. Because we've spent a lot of time infighting, back and forth about who's copying weights to what degree, using it as a backup or whatever. And it's easy to point fingers when we're all trying to, build and survive in this ecosystem. But let's really, really focus on moving the platform forward and say, this is a problem. How do we solve it? How do we make this the best thing in the world, right? I mean, I think it'd be really exciting. So get off my soapbox for a second.
No, jump back up, Paul. Everyone likes to hear. So in the coming months, like CRs are not going to be, it's not going to be our major push at Opentensor. We think we have the tools to fight this, but there are some really intelligent additional designs that we're seeing coming out of people that are working with different forms of Yuma Consensus. And this is something that we want to work on likely in the next year, is allowing people to modify YC to increase or decrease the competitiveness of validation in one way or another. We're already starting to see this on some subnets. And this will be like where we take this particular path forward, is towards advances in consensus, YC 3 and beyond. One more thing in this release, actually, we mentioned it earlier, is that the upgrade to the Python side has actually come with a lot of fixes. Garrett, do you want to speak slightly to that, about like what's coming out here with the latest version of Python?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've taken in a lot of feedback lately within the last last couple of months, and we're seeing a lot of subnet owners finally making the switch to the latest Bittensor, which is something that they haven't done in a long time in many cases, where they stay on an old version like 6.9 or something like that. And we wanted to gather feedback on to like why that upgrade wasn't happening along the way. And we took a lot of feedback in, and we brought in a lot of improvements to the Bittensor SDK. And so not only are you going to get commit reveal v3 support, but you get a lot of other things as well. And these things are not the sexy features that make great headlines, but they're the things that matter when you're building subnets. So reliable connections is one. One of the big things that you'll notice in 8.x and really 8.4 and above is that we use the WebSockets library instead of the WebSocket library for one. We're removing our dependency on PySubstrate interface and these other legacy dependencies. And what this does for us is it improves performance, but it also makes connections a lot more reliable. So when you're building subnets on 8.5 and above, it'll be a much smoother experience, and broken pipe issues and things that have plagued the community for a very long time should be mostly a thing of the past. So we brought a lot of these improvements into the new SDK. Of course, we're always gathering new feedback and hopping on those pain points as we get them. But we're seeing improvements with other things too, like logging, solving issues that people have had there, and sometimes it's just minor improvements that just make the subnet building experience just a little bit better, a little bit more painless. And that's what really matters with the SDK. So a huge shout out to our Python team. They've done a lot of the work that is, again, not always the glorious work in the spotlight, but it's the work that it really impacts the subnet developers. So I don't know, what more we want to talk about here on this call, but really, guys, if you haven't made the switch to Bittensor 8.x, I mean, please do so, at the very least, to support commit reveal v3. But really, it will be a better experience for you moving forward. You'll have more reliable connections. Things will work better. And in addition, you have a few extra Easter egg goodies like async substrate interface and async subtensor, which can be very performant for those of you who like to do things concurrently. And more to come. We're expanding those efforts. We're expanding async support. We're expanding our ability to kind of leave legacy libraries behind in favor of things that are much more performant in-house, like our async substrate interface class. So upgrade. It's going to be great. And obviously, we're with you every step of the way in the chat.
Booyakasha. That's it for updates. Now, considered having Nickel on the stage, but it was a bit last minute to talk about Zestimate. However, they have not returned my calls, so I think we'll just continue with this. If there are people who have questions, like to jump on the stage and chat more about this or ask questions to the experts here on the call, now's the moment. Raise your hand and we'll bring you up. Okay, we got Easy Trades. Hey, Easy, what's up? Mic issues. Sorry, Easy. Can't hear you. We can't have that conversation. Open floor to anybody else who wants to come up on stage. I'm sure Ref has some things to say. Validators choose subnets to validate. Couldn't it be that subnets can choose which validators can validate their subnet? A mutual agreement, subnet owners would filter out validators. They don't provide value to the subnet, probably as already been considered. So Stirred, it has been considered. There's some careful design there. Like obviously, if a bunch of subnets were to, if you're like a 9% subnet and you banned a validator, you would be dropping their APY by a massive amount. So that's one problem. Okay, welcome, Ref.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me. It's nice to see that because we started with commit reveal 2.0. No, we started with 1.0. That was really hard to implement. Then 2.0 came in, and that was much better. And finally, 3.0 is very easy to implement. Most of the subnet owners just have to upgrade to the newer SDK and flip a switch. So now we can widely deploy it. But with commit reveal 2.0, we learned that it is an effective deterrent against the weight copiers, and they run away on the second day. So excited to see weight copiers running away on all subnets.
Yeah,
Ref, tell us a little bit about how that went on. As in, if you're still here, Ref, like, what has the effect been for your version of CR on Horde, and how did you make it work?
So commit reveal 1.0 had some design issues which made it hard to implement, but we really wanted to get rid of weight copiers for some reason, and eventually we managed to get it to work. It took way more effort than it should, that's true. But what we did is we also took care about the speed of the subnet or volatility of weights. So we incentivized miners to make their performance different. So each miner actually has 2 UIDs, and they shift their capacity of the compute between those 2 UIDs, or some have 4, some have 6. And thanks to that, the weights from the previous epoch are going to be vastly different than the weights from the current epoch. One of the weight copiers started skipping 2. So instead of looking at the previous epoch, he looked 2 epochs behind, and that worked a little bit. But then some of the miners realized that this is the case, and they started shifting every 3 epochs, and that was too much for the weight copiers to handle, and they just gave up.
So this required that every miner have 3 UIDs?
So in order to properly do it, you would need a minimum of 3, where you move your capacity. Let's say you have your capacity on number 1, and then you throw a dice. Depending on what comes out, you move it to UID 2 or UID 3. And nobody knows except you and the validators who will actually test you what's your capacity going to be and where your weights are going to go. And then you do it again and again. And dishonest validator will have a 50-50 chance that it's going to hit on a large number of UIDs. He's going to get 50% of the V-trust.
Exactly. And so for subnets that don't have that ability, what you just described, Rev, it really comes down to just churn, right? If you don't have any churn in your validation, then you're unable to drive out weight copiers.
Yes,
Now,
if your weights are all the time the same, then the concealment period doesn't really matter. So what I suggest is instead of increasing the concealment period to 20, 40 tempos, work on the subnet a little bit to make it more dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Note that in CR3, we reveal the weights in order. So if you commit 10, they come out of the chain in that order of the commits. So this actually helps a little bit with CR3 because Isabella, your analysis is actually, I'm not sure it's based on that design either. With competition subnets like 9 and 29, I actually think that CR3 can have a larger effect because of when a shift does occur in the subnet, that effect is more drastic. And we'll see from Coldent and the Macrocosmos team about that specifically, if that does indeed have the effect we're looking for.
So subnet 9 has like a 1% minimum difference between the old model and the new leader. And if you are not at least 1% better than the previous model, then you're not counted as a new leader. Now, this makes the new leader change infrequently. If we would decrease that number from 1% to like a 0.5%, the leader would change more frequently. And we could also prohibit submitting a new leader on the same UID so that the bulk of the consensus would move around the subnet unpredictably for a weight copier. Generally, not a lot of subnet owners have engaged in a discussion about how to do it. We do have a Church of Rao Discord. There is a Subnets channel. You can go there and have a discussion with other subnet owners, try to figure out how to alter your subnet a little bit so that it is a bad place for weight copiers to be.
I highly recommend, if you've not gone to the Church Route channel, definitely check it out. It's a wealth of information. And watch the owner's subnet channel as well.
Thanks, Ref, for suggesting that. Great.
Pleasure.
If you're not on stage, I don't think you wanted to be on stage. And that was a major update for this week. Next week, maybe we'll have Nickel on to talk about Zestimate. Maybe Easy Trades, Mike will be ready. But otherwise, that's it. This is short and sweet, guys. Thanks for coming. Let's push forward and make this happen as a community. Really excited. Like, work with our team, work with Isabella to pick the correct parameters, and let's kick them out. Thanks, y'all.
Real quick, I am a resource. If somebody if you're not sure who to talk to, just DM me, and I'll find out who you need to talk to. If I can't find the answer, I'll find out who does know. I'm always there for whatever you need.
Thanks, Paul.
And if you don't enable commit reveal, you can tell them hell's coming, and I'm coming with it.
But in a friendly way.
In a friendly way. I'll be professional.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Take care.